So it's co-authored with two friends. So Mathis Bachelot. Mathis Bachelot actually is a former Epoch student, and for the moment he's finishing his PhD at the University of Lille, northern France. And well, he's doing his PhD under my co-supervision, and the other co-supervisor is the second co-author of this paper, Mathilde Kergoët-Larivière. Mathilde, she's a professor of labor economics at Lille also. Okay, so well, I know some of you. I would say a few of you, because I gave a seminar in October, November, but I mean, I know just like 3 or 4 of you. So maybe I can present myself very briefly, okay? Just 3 minutes so that you know who I am. So I started my career at the University Paris-Nanterre, west of Paris, and then I moved to the Université des Antilles, so Antilles are the like islands in the Caribbean area, and it was cool. And then I moved to the to Université Paris-Cité, so a very big university in Paris. Yep. Yeah, it's probably with my computer. Non, but essaye celui-ci. Okay, so I continue without the slide. So now I'm professor of economics at the Université Paris-Cité. So when you see UPC, it's for Université Paris-Cité. And as David just told you, I was responsible for the Epoch program for, I don't know, 6-7 years at UPC. Now it's over for different reasons, but still I'm like very, I really like the Epoch program. It's, I would say, part of my career. And so now I'm a director of the doctoral school, so for PhD students, at the Université Paris-Cité. So all the doctoral PhD students in history, geography, economy, sociology, and philosophy. And also, last thing, so my research fields, I'm working on, let's say, the economy of the business firm. So I'm really interested in corporate control, corporate governance, corporate finance, the way it is related with inequalities, the employment relation. Very interested also by gender inequalities, for instance, in leadership positions. And also, for a couple of years, I'm also really interested by the responsibility of firms in, let's say, the green or energy transition. And this is going to be the topic for today. And from a methodological point of view, usually, and you will see that in this paper, I'm using large data sets and applied microeconometrics. Okay, I think that's, what can I say? No. Okay, so let's move on with the paper. Hein? Ouais, j'ai pas de souris, ça marche pas, c'est bloqué. Attends. Avec le pad, ouais, non, c'est bloqué. Ok, ouais, là c'est bon. Après les flèches, ça marche. Okay, so obviously the objective, we have, let's say, 40 minutes, so the objective is to give you a broad overview of what we try to do, why I hope it is interesting. Okay, now I'm going to stay here. Okay, because I'm a bit far from... okay. So I'm going to try to show you why it is an interesting question and the way we deal with this question, which kind of data, and from an empirical point of view, what we do and for which kind of results. So the paper deals with eco-innovation. If you don't like the word eco-innovation, you can replace by green innovation. Basically, these are strict synonymous. So, and well, it's not a legal concept, it's an economic concept that refers to any innovation that generates positive environmental benefits. So it's quite a broad concept, and I'm gonna speak a bit more about that later on. Well, in any case, it seems that, well, I would say there is a broad consensus to say that those kind of innovations, green innovations by private firms, should be or will be or is indeed a key driver of the ongoing, upcoming green energy transition. I mean, there won't be any transition if at some point private firms do not invest, do not innovate to mitigate like climate change or destruction of biodiversity and so on. So maybe just an example, if you consider the French case, and if we consider just so-called climate-related investments, so it's just related to climate, not even to destruction of biodiversity. Well, we have the idea that if France wants to achieve its objectives in terms of decarbonation, then in the coming years, private firms need to invest 50 billion per year more. So it's almost doubling the effort. Okay, so it's a huge effort just for decarbonization. And once again, I'm not even talking about biodiversity and so on. So again, the main idea here is that there won't be any transition without considerable efforts by private firms. And those efforts should take the form of green investment and green innovations. So without surprise, there is a burgeoning literature about those eco-innovations. And well, either you can think about the drivers of this innovation, so how to foster, for example, these innovations, or alternatively, you can try to examine the consequences, the outcomes of those eco-innovation, and this is where we are with this paper. So we are interested by the consequences of eco-innovation, and more particularly, so there are many consequences you can consider. We are looking at the employment consequences, so the effects of green innovations on labor markets. So we look both at the quantity of jobs created, destroyed, but also, it's super important, we try to deal as much as we can with the quality, okay? So quality of jobs. You know, a job, it's not just a job, it's also, I mean, working conditions, type of contract, okay, open-ended versus fixed-term contract. It's a wage, obviously. So, and all these dimensions are related to, I would say, worker welfare. And, well, so there is in labor economics quantity of papers trying to examine labor job quality beyond just quantity of jobs. So we consider the consequences of eco-innovation on job quantity, quality, and we do that for different types of workers. So when I say for different types of workers, it means that we are very interested by inequalities across workers in terms of age, in terms of skills, and so on. And so why is it important to be interested by job quality for and inequalities in terms of job quality? It's obviously a matter of equity, for sure. I mean, you just had a seminar about inequalities, so I'm well aware that you are well aware of the importance in terms of fairness and so on of inequalities, but it's also a matter of efficiency. And I would say it's really a distinctive flavor of institutional economics, maybe, trying to tie together issues of equity and of efficiency, trying to understand both at the same time. And why it is also a matter of efficiency, because it is very clear now that inequalities likely to be generated by the green transition, by public policy to foster the green transition. Those inequalities may fuel, I would say, social backlash. Okay, think about the, I don't know, the Yellow Vest movement in France. Think about what's going on in many countries, in Europe or in the US, okay, with indeed a very strong backlash against the ecological transition. And so this backlash may ultimately threaten the transition itself. So it's super important, I think, to examine more deeply what are the consequences of those efforts by private firms on job quality, inequalities across workers. And when we deal with that, at some point we are not so far from the, I don't know if you are familiar with the notion of just transition, okay? So just transition was put forward, I would say 15 years ago by trade unions, okay? With the idea indeed that if there should be a green transition, then it is very important, okay, for worker representatives, for trade unions to think about the consequences in terms of inequality and so on of this just transition. And here, so at first it was not an academic concept, okay, but now I think we can put some light here. So you've got a rather good definition of just transition here by the ILO, okay, so just transition promotes environmentally sustainable economies, for sure. That's the transition, in a way that is inclusive by creating decent work opportunities, reducing inequality, and by leaving no one behind. Okay. So, as I told you, there is a literature about eco-innovations, and there is a small literature examining the effect of eco-innovation on employment. But so far, I would say this literature has mainly focused on the effect on job quantity, whether it triggered job destructions or creation. And I think it's fair to say that so far, job quality, so employment stability, wages, working conditions, have not been considered very deeply. And, well, remember the definition of just transition. I mean, if you don't have any indicator measures of job quality, then it's impossible to talk about decent work opportunities. I mean, decent mean really refer to job quality. Also, this literature so far is not really focused on inequalities across workers. Once again, impossible to deal with the just transition if you don't have ideas about inequalities in terms of job quality. And also, finally, coming across this literature, you will finally, there is not so much about the singularity, I would say, the originality of the green transition, of eco-innovations regarding labor market dynamics. So finally, there have been a couple, we know that, of industrial revolutions for the past 2 centuries. And each time there is a sort of thinking about, are those revolutions really complete revolution, like completely reshaping, for instance here, labor market dynamics, or is it just like a normal transition? Well, trying to delve with this question, I would say that it's important to consider the particularities, the singularity of eco-innovation as compared to standard, conventional, non-eco-innovation. Okay? So this is also something that we want to do with this paper, once again, to examine the very singularity of the ongoing green transition. So obviously, if you have any question during my talk, do not hesitate. I will be happy to answer. So the contribution of the paper. So what we try to do, I think you get the point now. So we try to study the impact of eco-innovation on job quantity and quality, taking into account inequalities across workers and comparing with standard innovation. And to do so, we use data that I will present you, obviously. And we use a microeconometric methodology to identify causal effect here. And well, it's I will say a word on this later on. We use a so-called cost exact matching diff and diff estimator. I will be back with the methodology later on. Okay, so in the paper, so it's very classic. After the introduction, we try to come across, okay, to make a synthesis of the literature on the employment effect of eco-innovations. And in particular, we try to have a couple of like hypotheses that could be tested with our empirical approach. And well, what we have decided, it's quite evident here, quite obvious. It appears that if we want to understand the effect of eco-innovation on employment, we have to deal with two distinct literatures. So the first, okay, is obviously the labor effect of standard innovation, because eco-innovation are basically innovations. Okay, so you know there are like debates, papers on the labor effect of classic innovations. So we start with this literature, but also we have to take into account, obviously, that green innovations are not just innovation; they are green, hopefully. Okay, and so we also came across the literature on green skills, green jobs. Okay, you've got some papers now that try to consider whether or not green jobs require specific skills, so-called green skills. And if you cross those two strands of literature, then you can have a couple of ideas about what we expect from eco-innovation. And so we try to test those ideas. So the first, I'm going to be quick here, okay? This is quite simple. If you have like questions, just tell me. But I prefer to spend a bit more time on how do we test these basic ideas. So first, we expect, okay, green innovations, eco-innovations, to have positive effect on employment. Why? Because, well, a number, not all, I'll be back on that, but a number of green innovations are made by firms to basically meet new demand, okay, like for green products, green services, okay? And, well, if those innovations are successful, we expect the demand to increase, and so we expect labor demand to increase, okay? So there will be a job creation effect, which is also quite classical in with standard innovations. At the same time, you know, this is for, I would say, product innovation. You also have process innovation. You know that. It's quite simple. Well, there it can be a slightly more complex. With standard innovation, usually process innovation may require like replacing labor with capital. In this case, it may destroy jobs. But with eco-innovation, we rather expect a replacement of polluting capital with labor-intensive processes. So, whether we consider product innovations or process innovations, we rather expect eco-innovations to be associated to trigger employment creation. New demand, replacing polluting capital with labor-intensive process. That's the expectation, and this is more or less what is found so far in the few papers that have examined the question. It's clear for this one? Yep, okay. Then, second hypothesis, so second bullet, we also expect those innovations to be skill biased, okay, or to trigger skill biased technical change. Well, it should be the case that those eco-innovations are rather favorable for high-skilled employment, for high-skilled workers in terms of wages, and by contrast, to be to have a rather negative effect on low-skilled workers, because this is innovation. Okay, so it's well, this idea of skill-biased technical change is really a cornerstone of like the economy of innovation and so on. So we also probably expect that with eco-innovation, but this is to be really considered more deeply. Also in terms of inequalities, so we expect inequalities in terms of skills, but probably also in terms of gender. Okay, you know, there are some papers arguing that you know, this classical observation that women are underrepresented in STEM, so scientific, technical, engineering, and medical fields. Okay, whether in Europe or in the US. Well, it might be the case, probably, okay, that green skills are to some extent, not so sure, it's to be examined, I would say. But if this is the case, that green skills are also not so far from skills required in STEM fields, it might be the case, finally, that we may see a gender bias, okay, to the favor of males and to the detriment of females, okay? That's a possible expectation, possible effects of green innovation, so this gender bias. And finally, there is also a small literature trying to, I mean, obviously, we are all aware that eco-innovation is a very broad term, okay, with probably a lot of heterogeneity. You've got like head of pipes, small incremental innovation. You have probably like much more radical innovations, but also you have you may make a distinction in between the drivers of those innovation. You know that obviously there is now in every country a large regulation, taxes, norms. So you've got on one side regulatory-driven eco-innovations, so eco-innovations that are implemented in reaction of new environmental regulation. And on the opposite, you've got so-called, I would say, proactive eco-innovation, voluntary eco-innovation that are made to meet a new demand, that are made to, I don't know, to save on cost, energy cost, for instance. So I would say it's a very classical reasoning in economy, mainstream or heterodox economy, I would say, to say that maybe, okay, we may expect regulatory-driven eco-innovations to have less beneficial effects because it might be a constraint for firms as compared to more proactive eco-innovations. But once again, okay, it's not so clear, and there are arguments saying that regulation may like foster new way to produce and so on, and finally may have very beneficial consequences. So this is something we have to we will try to consider here. I think that's all for the, I would say, the theoretical part. It's basic theory, I would say. It's okay, yeah. Okay, now the data. I think it's super important. So you understand our objective here. Now, obviously, the problem is to have data that allow us, well, to examine what we want to examine. Okay, so the first thing we want to have is information on eco-innovation. Sure. Ouais. Ouais, je sais pas. Ouais, c'est un peu, ça fait mal aux yeux, non, c'est ça. Ouais. Okay, so. Okay, so for eco-innovation, we use one survey, okay? So the 220 community innovation survey for France, it's a very, it's a classic survey on innovation made at for almost every European countries. And very interestingly, in our case, in the Community Innovation Survey 2020, there is a special section, okay, dedicated to eco-green innovation. It was the case also in 2008, and then nothing in between for 12 years, and then eco-innovation was back in the survey in 2020. So we used this survey, and here we have almost 15,000 private firms in France outside agriculture, okay, with at least 10 employees, and well, those firms are representative of the industrial French sector. So with this survey, we are able to say whether or not firms did eco-innovation. And so we are able to build a treatment variable, okay? So we have first, so managers are directly surveyed on whether or not they did innovation with significant environmental benefits, okay, and whether those benefits were very significant and so on. Okay, so based on this question, okay, so based on this question, we are able to distinguish in between three groups of firms. You've got firms that did not innovate. So the question is for the period 2018 to 2020. Okay, so for the 2 years preceding the survey. So we have a first group that are non-innovators, so firms that did not innovate at all for the past 2 years. Okay, we have second group, non-eco-innovators, so firms that did innovate but with no particular environmental benefits. So this is like standard classical innovation. And finally, the third group. Je pense que c'est. Ouais, ça faisait pas ça avec le jeune avant. Ouais, je suis désolé. Je continue ou... Ouais, ok, je continue. Ok, sorry for that. So the last group is the one we are really interested in, eco-innovators. I mean, firms that did at least, that implemented at least one eco-innovation in the previous past 2 years. Okay, and je me rappelle plus trop. Sans les slides, je suis perdu. Ouais, ok. Ouais, c'est bizarre. But we already had this problem when I was doing my seminar here, no? Yeah, you remember this one? I mean, but yeah, this is my computer, and apparently it's not responsible. No, it's really a classic at the CNAM, apparently. Okay. Okay. I'm going. Let's move on, otherwise we are going to be late. Okay. So, what is super important here is, obviously, you know that we use a so-called declarative measure of eco-innovation. So this is answers by managers. And usually economists do not like so much declarative approach because it is considered to be subjective and so on. Yes, it is subjective in a sense, okay? But what do we have if not using this one? Some papers use measures based on intellectual property rights. Okay, so for instance, green patents, green trademarks. Okay, well, for sure it is probably objective, but this is super restrictive. And a good indication of that, there is a very interesting paper by Bloch et al. 2024 in Research Policy, and they have a sample of Italian firms, and about 5,000 Italian firms, and they compare the measure of green innovation they have with a declarative approach and with an approach using green patents. And well, the results are really striking, okay? When you use patents, okay, green patents, you've got only 1% of Italian firms that indeed have implemented green innovation, okay? So it means that very few firms are able to apply for a new patents, okay? Or may want to do so, okay? And most firms, I mean 99% here, do not have any green patents. So, I mean, in a sense, if you are really interested, like we are, by the examining the way the green transition shape labor market dynamics, then, well, you won't see anything with a measure that just capture 1% of firms. So we have chosen the declarative approach, and with this declarative approach, in the Italian case, you've got about 30%, okay, of firms that at some point have made at least one innovation with significant environmental benefits. I will show you that this is approximately what we have in our French sample. Okay, a lot of small issues today. Ah, il faut que je change là? Ça, celui-là, il est... Ah ouais, ok. Okay, so basically with the CISSE 2020, we have our measure of green innovation, and then obviously we want measures on labor, okay, employment, and to do so we match the CISSE 2020 with two administrative data sets using the firm level identifier, and in particular we use the BTS. I don't know if you know this one. It's base tous les salariés in French. It's a administrative data that is absolutely exhaustive, and every year you've got information on wages, contracts, gender, and so on of every workers in a French establishment. So every year you've got approximately 18 millions of lines. Okay, so we use those administrative data sets to collect information on labor, and we aggregate them at the firm level to measure like job creation, job destructions, regarding total employment, female employment, employment of senior workers, and so on. Okay, and so finally, this is really the design of the paper. Okay, we know through the CISSE survey, we know whether or not firms have innovated here in between 2018 and 2020, and we are able to track, to measure employment 1 year, so before the innovation for all firms, and we are able to look at labor employment after the innovation. So basically, we will try to compare what's going on before and after the innovative shock for our various groups of firms. So if you are a bit familiar with that, I don't know if you're really familiar with that, but basically, okay, if you look at the evolution of, let's say, a particular outcome, labor in this case, for various groups of firms, some treated, some not, before and after the treatment, it's a so-called diff and diff estimator. But before trying to do that, there is one problem we have to deal with, and this problem is that firms that have, you know that, I'm sure, firms that have innovated, it's a classic in economics of innovation, firms that innovate are probably different, like bigger or I don't know, that as compared to firms that did not innovate. And so it might be a problem because you might try to compare things that are impossible to compare. So before applying the diff and diff, we try to have I would say, a common support, comparable firms, okay, treated and non-treated. To do so, we used course exact matching. Let's say I'm going to just to pass this one, okay, because it may take like 5 minutes, and I prefer to focus on other aspects of the paper. If you want me to come back on the course exact matching process, I would be very happy to do so. But the idea basically, okay, is to exclude, okay, this is a matching algorithm, okay, which the aim is to exclude a number of firms, whether innovative firms or non-innovative, that do not have any counterpart, okay? So like treated firms that are very large or in particular sector with no counterpart in non-innovative firms, or non-innovative firms that will be very small, or I don't know, okay? So we use various variables, observables, just to create a common support. I mean, we just exclude a number of firms that are not directly comparable, that do not have any counterpart. Okay, so we reduce our sample, but doing so, okay, we avoid the problem of comparing things that are just impossible to compare. So we have a common support, a match sample or a common support. Okay, and there are many ways many different ways in econometrics you can do this matching for various reasons. We choose course exact matching, but well, it's one possibility among others. Now, on this common support, what we do, so the equation is here, but I think it might be important to spend like 2 minutes on this one. So on the left-hand side, what we try to explain why G, so G is for the firm. This is the growth rate of, let's say, employment, okay, in firm G. So from 2017 to 2021, this is what we want to explain, okay? And, well, basically, we have a dummy variable here that takes value 1 if the firm is a non-eco-innovator, okay? We have a dummy variable echo here that takes 1 if the firm is an eco-innovator. So the reference, everything is measured as compared to relative to non-innovator, okay? So the coefficients here, alpha 1, alpha 2, gives you, okay, under some identifying assumption, gives you the effect, okay, of various types of innovation relative to non-innovation, and we have some obviously X is a vector of controls, okay. So if you think about that, because we use growth rate as an outcome, and because we have various groups of firms, okay, so we compare the evolution across various types of firms. This is, you can trust me here, okay, this is a very basic diff and diff estimator here. And then, so this is just for growth rate of employment, okay? And, well, also we use many other outcomes. So growth rate of employment by occupational for high-skilled and low-skilled workers, growth rate for employment for males and females, senior workers, young workers, and so on. By type of contract, growth rate of mean hourly growth rate. Remember, we are also interested by job quality. There is one dimension of job quality we do not capture at all because there is nothing in the data in the BTS. This is, I mean, it would have been super interesting, but we don't have any data here. This is working conditions. We have nothing on working conditions, so it's really a blind spot, I would say, on the paper. And when we talk about job quality, it's job quality outside working condition, and I'm well aware that it is a limit, but this is the way it is, I would say. Okay, so normally, okay, yeah. Again, I'm not so sure how familiar you are with difference and differences. Well, you know, difference and differences are really standard estimator now to evaluate various public policy or shock, or okay. So, well, I told you that in this regression model, alpha 1 and alpha 2 normally identify the effect of innovation. Well, it's not exactly true. It is the case if, okay, if we are sure, this is a parallel thread assumption, if we are sure that before the shock, before the innovation, so let's say in 2012, 2013, 14, 15, and so on, if we are sure that the outcome we are interested in, so labor in this case, job creation, was not different, okay, had not a diverging trend in between our various groups of firms, okay? Obviously, if you observe that 2 or 3 years before the innovation, innovative firms started to change, okay, their workforce structure and so on, then it becomes really hard to say that what you identify is the effect of innovation on labor. Okay, you get the point? So what we want, we would like to test, okay, the parallel assumption, I mean the fact that trends in the outcome we are interested in were not too different before the innovation. And I mean, I would say one of the strengths of the paper is that we measure innovation just so on one period, 2018, 2020, but we are able, through the BTS dataset, we are able to track the evolutions of employment way before, up to 2010, okay? So we can test for this parallel trend assumption, and because we are able to test it, somehow it reinforces the confidence we are in our estimator. Okay, so we tested, I'm not going into the detail, but it's a two-way fixed effect model, so you've got the evolution of, let's say, employment here, okay, in firm G at time t. This time we have various years, okay? We have a year fixed effect, a firm fixed effect, so we clean for time variant heterogeneity, okay, across firms. And then once again, okay, we have our indicator of innovation. And so for instance here, okay, the interaction of the year effect and eco-innovation will tell you, okay, this interaction term will tell you whether in any given year, eco-innovator were different in terms of, let's say, employment creation as compared to non-innovative firms. So it's, I would say, a direct test of the parallel trend assumption. Yep. Okay. And basically, I would say the parallel trend assumption would be supported if all the coefficients here are just equal, meaning that each year there is no difference in terms of job creation before the shock in between our various groups of firm. I don't know if it's very clear, but this is really the best I can do here. It's late. And okay, so here, now, what we have in our data, so we have about, we start with about 13 firms, 13,000 firms, and you see it's the proportion of each type of firms. These are very similar to what I told you about the Italian case. Look, we have here, okay, in our initial sample, 43% of firms said that they didn't innovate at all in the past 2 or 3 years. Okay, 28% of firms did innovate, but with no significant environmental benefits. And you have exactly the same proportion that in the Italian case. You have 30% of firms that green innovate. Okay, so I don't know. What can we think about that? I would say. Again, there is a vast heterogeneity of eco-innovations here, but it tells you, I would say, that eco-innovation is something. Something is on the way in private firms, in Italy, in firms, and so on. So not enough for sure. I mean, we are way behind what should be done to meet the objective of decarbonation and so on. I'm well aware of that, but still, it is true, and it is absolutely consistent with all the narratives we have and case studies and so on. Okay, a number here, 1/3 of firms, okay, did something, okay, that was in line with green transition over the sampled period. And well, for you on the right of the table, you've got the same proportion for the common support. So after the matching, remember, so we exclude a number, we have excluded a number of firms that were not comparable. And basically it's the same, we have about 30%. Okay, so think about that. Here it's 30% of eco-innovative firms. And 10 more minutes, it's okay? Or ouais, c'est bon. Okay, and maybe just to give you, otherwise it's very, I'll try to show you with just one number, otherwise it's very abstract, I would say. Je sais pas si on dit abstract en anglais. Ouais, abstract. Okay, it's okay. So I can say that. I was not so sure of this one. Okay, this is so descriptive statistics. This is for our sample, the mean, the average of our, let's say, first and main variable, so the growth rate of employment. Okay, for our common support of firms, and you see that well, the figure here is plus 0.17. So it means that on average, considering our panel of our sample of 10,000 firms, on average, gross workforce growth of increased by plus 17% from 2017 to 2020. Okay, plus 17%. So it's not that much. Well, we know that we have a growth rate of approximately 2% per year. Okay, so it's more or less on line with this. Okay, so it means that starting now, all the coefficients numbers I'm going to give you should be appreciated. Okay, relative to plus 17% of growth. Okay, so for instance, if we have a coefficient of plus 0.1, it means a premium in terms of job creation of 10 percentage points as compared to an average growth rate of 0.17. Okay, I don't know the result, I would say. No? Yeah, so very briefly, this is the graphs for the common trade assumption, parallel trade assumption. Okay, and for our various outcomes here, you've got the coefficients. Okay, the coefficients on the difference between non-green innovator or non-innovator, green innovator or non-innovator, and green innovator and non-green innovator. So, believe me here, it's not so easy to explain that. Now, let's say that for almost all of our outcomes, we do not have any evidence of diverging trends. Okay, so it means that if you look at total workforce, high-skilled workforce, wages, and so on, the years preceding the innovations, basically, we have evidence that our various groups of firms behave approximately the same way. So it rather supports the parallel trend hypothesis. Okay. Okay. Now I'm gonna finish in 5 minutes. I'm just going to present you the results. So I'm aware that it's applied economics is a bit frustrating because usually the results are really what you expect. Otherwise, it's a bit strange, I would say. So in this case, we have some results. I don't know if they are like striking or spectacular, but at least, okay, I'm quite confident in the way we get those results. So let's start with the first one. Okay, I would say the first one that was already in a couple of papers. So you see here, okay, this first column, okay, is the first regression with as an outcome the rate of growth of total employment, okay? And you've got the coefficients here for non-eco-innovator, so innovators but with no environmental benefits, and here the coefficients for eco-innovators, okay? I do not put the coefficients for other variables and controls and so on. And here you have a test of difference in between those two. So what you see, basically, okay, is that the two coefficients here are positive, significant. So it means that whether you consider standard innovation or eco-innovation, they do trigger significant job creation, okay? And the difference in the two coefficients is not significant. So there is, from this point of view, I would say, eco-innovations are just like standard innovation. That's the main message, I would say, of the first message of the paper. So in a sense, you might think it's not such a stronger result, but yes or no. At least it does not support the idea that the green transition, eco-innovation, would destroy jobs. This is absolutely not what we see in our data. Okay, in the French case, clearly, okay, eco-innovation, green transition is rather associated with a premium in terms of employment creation, just like standard innovation, and no singularity of eco-innovation as compared to standard innovation. That's the first result. Okay. Now, here you've got values. So each column is a different regression with a different outcomes. as a dependent variable. So in the second column, what you see is so growth rate of employment for high-skilled workers. Here again, okay, significant positive effect of basic innovation, standard innovation and eco-innovation and on high-skilled employment. And, well, you can try to compare, okay, those coefficients here, okay, with those coefficients for low-skilled workers. So remember the average growth rate of employment, okay, was plus 17%. So here it's a premium of, for instance, of plus 10 percentage points or plus 13 percentage points as compared to the sample average, okay? Now, look at the coefficient. I know it's probably very small for you, okay, but I don't know how to do that in a different way. For low-skilled workers, we have significant coefficients here, but they are way smaller. So for high-skilled workers, it's 0.1. Here it's 0.05. So it means that the premium in terms of job creation is much larger for high-skilled workers as compared to low-skilled workers. It is somehow an indication that indeed eco-innovation, just like standard innovation, are somehow skill biased. Okay? They favor high-skilled employments, not so much low-skilled employment. Okay? And okay, and in column 3, 4, 5, you can see, even so wherever you don't see anything, I would say you can see that the employment creation is concentrated rather on professional technicians and not so much on managerial employment, which is also not so surprising. I mean, green skills, okay, are rather engineering skills and not so much managerial skills, okay? Now, I told you we might have expected a gender bias, okay? It's one of the problems we can well, among many others, but there is this danger of the green transition to be associated with a bias against female employments. Well, that's not what we find here, okay? We do not have evidence of that, in the sense that, okay, here you've got the effect of eco-innovation. So this is eco-innovation, this is the growth rate of female employment, and here the growth rate of male employment. The coefficients here are positive, exactly the same. So green innovations do favor the creation of jobs for females just as for males in a similar way. Okay, so we do not see, okay, we finally somehow reject this hypothesis of gender biased, okay? By contrast, we find a strong bias here when we consider the difference across in terms of age, okay? Here there is absolutely no premium, no discount, but no premium for senior workers. I mean, in this case, I'm a senior worker. It's more than 50, okay? David, no, but next year, right? He's 76, I'm 75, so it's so I'm very recently a senior worker. Well, so job creation is really concentrated on young workers. Here again, you might say it's obvious, but we measure that. It's quite normal. I mean, probably senior workers lack the training and so on associated with green skills and so on. Okay. Almost the end, okay. The effects of green innovation on wages, type of contracts. Let's start with wages. So on average wage, we do not see nothing, okay. It might be due to the limitation of our data because we are the, let's say, we are the firm level. So what we look at are average firm average wage. So we lack sort of granularity. Probably things could have been different if we had individual data. It's not the case here, so it's for another paper. But considering average wage, we do not see nothing, no effect, no particular effect of innovations. But, okay, when we look at the average, when we make the distinction between the average wage of high-skilled workers on one side and low-skilled workers on the other side, here there is really one interesting effect. Eco-innovations are associated to a discount in terms of the evolution of wages for low-skilled workers. A discount, significant discount, so it means that really, apparently, green innovations do contribute to a decrease, okay, of the wage of low-skilled workers. So this is like here, strong evidence of bias against low-skilled workers, in particular in terms of wage here. So I think it's quite important to have this in mind, okay? Okay, and we also, column 4 and 5, we also see that eco-innovation rather contributes to the creation of permanent open-ended contracts, not so much fixed-term contracts. Finally, sorry, this paper is not so easy to present because there are a lot of results. I know that, but I hope you can handle with all these results. Finally, this is the very last one. I told you that there are a number of reasons to trying to make a distinction between like various types of eco-innovation. It's a very broad category. I'm well aware of that. And so here, okay, we make the distinction between 4 types of eco-innovation. How do I do that? Okay, or how do we do that? Okay, in the questionnaire, in the survey, there are questions. So what were the main drivers of those eco-innovations we are talking about? Did you do those innovations because you had to, like you were forced by a new environmental norm, or because of a new, I don't know, carbon tax, or to meet a new demand, and so on and so on, okay? So we can make a classification of various types of eco-innovation. So you've got a voluntary eco-innovation to meet a new consumers. You've got cost-driven innovation. I mean, you do that to save, in particular on energy costs, okay? And you've got so-called regulatory-driven eco-innovation, so driven by norms, taxes, and so on, okay? And well, importantly, those drivers are not mutually exclusive, okay? It's absolutely possible for a firm to green innovate with the objective of like as a reaction to a new regulation, but also with the objective to like put a new product on the market. So they are not mutually exclusive. So that it's possible from an econometric point of view to interact all this motive here, okay? And basically how you should read that, okay? So you've got the eco-innovation and non-eco-innovation here, eco-innovation here. Plus here we interact those with the various motives. We put everything together because once again they are not mutually exclusive, okay? So this is the extra effect, okay, of the various types as compared to eco-innovation. Basically what you see is that green innovations that are like somehow proactive when they are done to save on energy costs, to meet new demand, okay, they do create employment. And by contrast, there is I would say a small discount here when they are regulatory driven, okay? Well, it's obviously you should not understand this. It's not a message against green environmental regulation, not at all, okay? But environmental regulation obviously fixed a number of the main objective of environmental regulation is to have environmental benefits, okay? But in this case, you've got to be aware also that for the moment, at least in terms of job creation, there are also some issues related to those regulations. So surely it's not against environmental regulation. It's just, I would say, a warning to say that when you, apparently, when there are like a new environmental regulation, you might expect, okay, I would say, detrimental effects to low-skilled workers and to job creation, so you need to compensate at some point. Okay, so once again, I mean, question of issues of efficiency and equity are deeply related here. So that's the conclusion. Okay, so the conclusion, the very last slide. So I'm a bit lazy now, so I'm going to read. It's way easier for me to read the slide with you. I hope it's a good synthesis of the narrative and the results. So eco-innovations, like standard innovations, are associated with employment creation premium, and it appears to be primarily driven by proactive, non-regulatory driven eco-innovations. Second results, I would say, employment creation is particularly strong for high-skilled and non-senior workers, which is really consistent with a green skill bias technological change hypothesis. And finally, here again, it's I would say give some credence to the hypothesis or narrative of a skill bias. Eco-innovation are associated to a relative wage discount for low-skilled workers as compared to non-innovative firms. So, well, you are most of you are epoch students, and the other are like scope students. Okay, so it's really my, but also your job now to consider this kind of results and to think about the, well, what are the implications in terms of public policy? I guess, I hope probably a lot, okay? Obviously, if there is really, it seems to be the case, I mean, a bias against low-skilled workers, aged workers, then definitely it calls for targeted efforts toward low-skilled senior workers, notably through training initiatives focused on green skills. So it's, I would say, one of the principal implications in terms of economic policy. It's a bit broad, but well. And also, I started with a just transition story, remember? And I told you that just transition was put forward 15 years ago by trade unions. And so for trade unions, I mean, it's probably also quite important to have this sort of evidence, because, well, for trade unions, it need to ensure that the interests of low-skilled workers are systematically taken into account in firm collective bargaining on environmental issues. And I don't know if you know that, but in a number of countries, including France, especially in Europe, there is, I would say, a rise to power of collective bargaining negotiations dealing especially with the green transition, with eco-innovations. That's, okay, really this kind of result is, I would say, a warning for trade unions to consider always the effect of those types of innovation on the situation of low-skilled workers.